Good morning. Welcome to MWise. I'm Mark. I'm your session facilitator. A couple quick announcements. Lunch today is at 12:15, but we also have lunch and learn sessions. So I encourage you to download the app if you haven't already, because they're limited seating, first come, first serve. And after this session, it'd be great if you could participate in the surveys. The surveys, again, are available in your app. If you haven't been scanned, you don't receive them, but if you have been scanned, surveys should appear about 15 minutes after the session. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Please welcome Casey Sensnick.
Good morning, and thank you for being here, as well as our online audience. My name is Casey Sensnick. I just retired this summer from Rockingham County Schools as the Chief Technology Officer, and now I've moved on to work with a company that believes in working with education and education institutions, not only for cybersecurity, but also for physical and safety of our students. So I appreciate you being here to learn about our story. We were a malware attack victim, and the evolution of how a security posture comes in. So I kind of always put up a little agenda so everybody knows where I'm headed. How do I compare as a school district to you guys in the corporate world? I have 28 sites where internet goes into. I have 2,500 to 3,000 employees, depending on our sub lists and our bus drivers. And I have 13,000 students connecting to my internet, and they don't just do it on one device. We built our internet in 2015 to be 3 devices per student. If you think about if you have kids at home, not only do they have the Chromebook that we provide as a one-to-one district, but they had their phones and their tablets and every other device out there. So we needed to have a security posture that was better than what we did in 2017. So that's where I'm going to take you back to is 2017. In 2017, right before Christmas break, the students were headed out on a half day on Tuesday, and at Friday, our central office called and said our computers are running slow, and we can't connect to the internet. So we went over, sent some technicians to take a look at it, and they found all these processes that you see running. Now, I want to say some of the pictures are blurry because if you've been in a malware attack, you can't use your internet and you can't use your computers. So we used our phones to take pictures of what we were seeing to communicate with each other. So we worked over this weekend trying to figure out what was going on. We deleted everything. We got the computers back up and running. Friday was beautiful. Everything looked great until the end of the day. Along comes the end of the day, and they're saying they're not running again. And this time, instead of a few computers, we've got about 8 or 10 in our central office, as well as several in our schools. We were using an endpoint protection solution that did not detect our malware. So when we were looking at the computers, we couldn't figure out what was dropping this payload. So we had switched to a free solution that was online, and I won't be sharing any of those specifically. If you want to know more, I can talk to you about them afterwards. And we put that free solution on, ran it, and then we discovered that we had Emotet. And that was just one of the bots that had dropped into our systems. So we knew with our temporary malware protection that we needed to get rid of this. So we put that on all of our machines, central office. We had turned down our network, ran it, spent the entire weekend, 12 to 14 hours on Saturday and Sunday, felt confident we were ready for school on Monday. Well, needless to say, on Monday it happened again, and the culprit turned out to be a download of an incorrect invoice. And that patient zero, as we called it, had downloaded this onto her machine in the central office, and through the worm technology, of course, then it started to spread like crazy. Our internet was a spoken wheel, so everything came back to the central hub before it went out to the internet. So we weren't seeing the same amount of spread across all of our 28 sites. But those other schools that started reporting it on that Monday, we knew they had looked at this incorrect invoice and they had fell for this phishing attack. And there you can see it's downloaded on the computer. So now we had a problem. We had all of this malware, all of these bots, some of these you've probably heard of. We had a bunch, and it was all coming through this particular Emotet drop that had been downloaded. So a little bit what we did on Tuesday was our early release. Our students were leaving. We took everything offline. We turned the network completely off. We waited till our last bus of students dropped off, and then we were voice over IP, so I couldn't turn off phones until I knew students were home safely. There was just no way around it. But the minute they said that they were home, we shut the internet off at the main, and every site went down. Our superintendent made a video message. He also sent out calls through a call system to tell our staff to leave behind their laptops. Do not take them home. And if they did, they needed to bring them back. We needed every single device that was plugged into our network. So now what do we got to do? We got to figure out how to solve this problem that we have. And we have no network to solve it with. We had a couple hotspots, luckily, and we had no way of keeping track of time, who was going where, no shared documents. Everything was, in the cloud and online. So we started using whiteboards, and we came up with a plan because we needed to pick up 1,300 laptops across our district, and that was a pretty big thing. Our district in North Carolina, they're by counties, and our county is very, very large as far as square miles, but we're also very rural. So from our central hub, it can take you 45 minutes to one of the outskirt schools just because you're in the country, which is beautiful. If you're ever looking for a nice place to get away, we're great. So on December 19th, this is what we began to do. We told everybody that had a USB drive that they were not to plug it into anything else, and we made our central office staff leave them on the tables with their name and information on them because we weren't sure how infected they could be, and we didn't want them plugging them back in, and we wanted to see if there was a way we could salvage their data. We also drove the vans across the district to collect these laptops. So what I didn't say at the beginning was, this was the year that we promised my 12-year-old and my 16-year-old we were going to Universal Studios instead for Christmas. Needless to say, that did not happen. So they pitched in, and this van picture here is at 1 a.m., and my 12-year-old is with them helping unload the van of laptops. So they dove right in and helped us. I had a staff of 10, including myself, one network engineer. So it was all hands on deck. You can see some of the laptops that we brought in. We had them just everywhere. This is something that it reminds me of, if you've heard the saying, if you move, that's the best way to get rid of your stuff. Well, if you have a malware attack, it's the best way to find things that people shouldn't still have, and some of the crazy things that you find along the way. A couple of my favorites was the typewriter, because now it actually was useful. And the two Chromebooks there that are taped shut, I guess they thought the malware could escape it, so they wrapped them in tape so they couldn't be used. And my personal favorite is the top left, because everybody knows putting your wet umbrella inside the trash basket with your power strip to your computers makes good sense. And so we were discovering all kinds of things, and some of that we took back with us that didn't need to stay, and others we just, were like, oh, great, you have a typewriter. I put up a calendar just to kind of give you an idea of what our schedule became. So once we realized that we had this malware, I took it personally because, no, that just doesn't happen. So I called the police department of our local city and said, I want to file a police report. And they kind of laughed. They're like, how do we do that? And I said, I don't care how you do it. Just come up here and take notes, and I'll tell you what happened to us because I want it documented. And we did that in every one of our cities where our schools were, and that was 4. And I also did our local sheriff's department, because I wanted people to know that we were a victim. This wasn't something we self-inflicted. This is something that happened to us. And then I decided to call the FBI. Why not? Before, the FBI didn't have the stuff they have now. If you haven't looked into it, they're phenomenal resources. You can call them. They'll come out. They'll help you. They have a 1-800 number. They have the whole thing set up for that. We didn't have that. So I called a regional office and said, hey, we were attacked by malware. And I'm telling you, because you're the FBI, what are you going to do about it? What can you do to help us? And so we began a paperwork trail with them, and they started working with us. We had to send email to our staff. We had to let our cabinet know. And we also wanted to do a press release. And I will tell you that our superintendent didn't believe in keeping this a secret. He wanted everybody to know. It was Christmas. We had no internet. We didn't know if we'd be back from Christmas break. So he was all about going out there and doing a press release. I suggest if you ever get in this situation and you're meeting with the press, to have a handout. So we did a handout. It was 4 pages, but it also had his talking points in it. And my superintendent is wonderful, but he's not a techie person. So I made sure that his bullet points were things that he knew and he understood, and he studied it. And he's good with a lot of stuff, but he wasn't on the network as much as like the computer world. So we produced this, we handed it to the press so that they wouldn't misquote anything that we said. We wanted to make sure that the town knew who we were and what had really happened. We worked through Christmas. This is the day after Christmas. You can see that on the left there, we're inventorying all the machines because we wanted to know what teachers didn't turn them back in like they were supposed to. And if there was a cord in a classroom, it was gone. So we had cords to our voice over IP, but we also had cords from our phones that teachers could plug their laptops into. And we decided that was no longer needed. They could use the Wi-Fi. It was robust enough. And so we brought every cord that we could find back. On the 27th, we decided we'd re-image all our computers. And you can see we began working on that. And our schools put together charity drives and brought us food all the time. So that was really nice of them to, do that. They knew what we were working on. So then it was time to do a fancy presentation for the board. You knew the press was going to be there. So on the malware attack, I came to the board. I presented them that same timeline that we had given to the press. And it's just a kind of a sample of what that looked like. Anybody that wants any of the resources we used, I'm more than happy to send that to you in an email. I brought my son along, and he has some business cards at the end if you'd like to grab some, and I can share any of our documents with you. So we used something that was called On the Map, and it's a K-12 cyber group that is specifically looking at malware attacks of districts. And you can see we were number 284, and as of 22, there was 1,619 attacks, and those are published attacks. A lot of people keep them quiet. So I would take this to the board, and I showed them we weren't the first person this has ever happened to. In every board meeting afterwards, everyone, even right up until I retired, I would bring the map and show them how many more had happened. Just a couple of little samples. While we were going on, the county in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, the big county, they had a malware attack as well, and you couldn't do anything in the business office. You weren't allowed to get married, and you couldn't die because they couldn't tell you who you were. They couldn't see anything. Again, just another sample of the calendar. Most of our days were 12, 14, 18 hours that we worked. So the teachers are getting ready to come back, and we're also noticing this trend that once you've been attacked by malware and somebody's opened it, you know that your email becomes a source. So we had emails across the district. We were using Google for Education, and we still are, and all of our emails were being shut down. And you can see, just the specifics aren't important, but the screen there on the right is just lists of spam emails that were being sent as us and were coming into us. Of course, we made the press because we put it out there, and they were very good about sharing what had happened to us. Just a couple samples there of different articles that were released. So from December 19th to January 2nd, we had no network at all. That was 18 days of working on re-imaging machines, bringing schools back up, all the different pieces that we needed to do. I will say that at all of our sites, we also unplugged the routers there as well. So every site had no way to talk to anything. We had taken it down just in case somebody came in over the holiday. We wanted to make sure they had no access. What I'm extremely proud of is on January 3rd, our internet came back up for our staff. Our students were coming. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and my network engineer finished bringing the last site up. So when school started that day, the students were able to access internet with their Chromebooks, and we were able to use the IP phones. Unfortunately, teacher laptops were not going so well. Our machines were at 5 years old. They were being redone that coming summer of 2018. And we decided we couldn't deal with what we had in the old machines. We had to let them go, and we purchased new machines. And so we had a delay, of course, by the time you get them ordered and they get shipped, etc. Again, you can see we continued working like the virus was still there because we had brought the internet up, but we had no servers, no way to clock in, no way to take kids' lunches. Everything that was internally housed, camera servers, all of that was still down. We needed to bring them up. But what those 18 days did, what I like to say is it's the best thing that ever happened to Rockingham County Schools, because it was the first time in all the years I had been there we could shut the entire network off and upgrade everything to the latest. And our board was in support of that, and I'm sure you have that as well. Every time you say, well, this is going to be this weekend, or it's going to be that weekend, somebody has something that's going on. And in our world, it could be anything from a sports game to finance needed to process something in paperwork. There was a special event at a school. It's really hard to find a good time just to shut everything down. So we took advantage of that. We upgraded our equipment. We upgraded everything we had. We had also worked with a group that we brought in to help us because a staff of 10 with one network engineer was not going to be enough. We paid about $314,000 for this, and it was worth every single penny of the solution. One of the things that Paul that worked with us said to me was, Casey, your hair is going to be on fire for the next 90 days. You're not going to sleep. You're going to feel like you're running like crazy. It just is what it is. Just be prepared for what's coming. And that is the honest truth. And he said for the first 6 months, you might not sleep at all, but eventually it'll get better, and we're going to help you with that. And that's exactly what they did. They helped us by bringing us 200 refurbished laptops that we were able to get to our central office and bookkeepers and those essential workers. They delivered those laptops. I don't know, we had a thing with like 2 in the morning, but it was in the middle of the night. I texted my staff and said, laptops are about 30 minutes out. And I love this picture because the 2 that you see there, the females, they came in their pajamas. And they helped us unload these laptops and helped us get ready. There was no, I'm in bed, I don't want to help. They were right there. So we got our laptops and we refurbished them. So in the end, 42 days straight, Christmas and New Year's included. Most of our days were 12 hours, 14, 18 in some cases. It cost us $1.3 million in cash. That cash went to the 300 and some thousand that we paid for the solution to help us to repair our laptops and bring the last pieces of the network up to date. We were not ransomwared. Our firewall stopped the final communication from the ransomware going through. In the state of North Carolina, the Department of Public Instruction provides a firewall for us, but they don't provide that monitoring. So when we talked to them, they said, yeah, you can see it's blocked right here, but nobody called and told us. It took our discovery to figure out what was actually happening to us. And since then, they have now added more staff, and they're more regularly involved. But we also did some different things. When our endpoint protection didn't find Emotet, I called them. And I said, I pay you a lot of money, and you didn't even detect anything was going on. What are you going to do to help us? And they said, you didn't pay for that service. That was the last check I ever wrote to them. And we called that company that we used the free download that you can do personally. And I said, my staff uses your program. They love it. Will you help me? What can I do? And they said, not only will we help you, we will give you our program for the next 6 months for free and prove it'll work. And so I suggest anybody that uses the solution is you go ahead and give them a call and say, what happens to me when at midnight I find out that I'm infected with this major virus and I need somebody there to, help? In the education where we just don't have the staff. So we moved to that company. We also used another company to sit on the outside of our network. It's not the firewall, but it watches all of our traffic coming in and coming out. And it was a corporate level enterprise solution. And that's one thing we did that's different than a lot of educational institutions. We moved into the corporate side of protection. Because what you don't think about when you think about education is that we hold student data. I have 13,000 Social Security numbers that have never been used for a credit card. So education has become the new target because not only do we have their Social Security numbers, we have their addresses, we have their birth dates, we have everything there is to know about them. And depending on the school, they may also collect parent information. So as you know, over the years, education has become a target, and so we felt like we needed to be in the realm where the big businesses were that were experiencing these same types of concerns. And thankfully, our Board of Education was in support of that. So we had a lot of bad methodology. And this is why I do this presentation, because I want people to know what we did wrong. Me standing up here just telling you a story doesn't help you. We made some drastic changes. First of all, we took away administrative rights on computers. And we had those because teachers felt like they needed to download everything. And I hope that you have experienced the coupon printer fiasco, where everybody wants to download the coupon printer, but it turns into being malware infested. And so we took it away. We said, we're sorry, the computer now is only going to be for your school and your education work. If the programs on it allow you to do something at home, that's fine, but we're not installing anything that doesn't belong and is pre-approved, and we're not going to let you do it either. We had that same endpoint for years and years and years because we had been safe. We never bothered to look in what would happen if we weren't. And so now, as we move through the years, we always talk to our providers about what they're going to do in these types of situations. Making sure, as that third bullet says, will your endpoint provider help when it hits the fan? And in our case, it was a no. Network cables in our buildings were easily accessible. We didn't really think about it at the time. You know, it's teachers, they're in a classroom. Well, after this had happened, about a year or so later, we have all these objects and these different things in place to know what's going on. We had a gentleman come in and present to our schools about your health benefits. Okay, we have an open guest network that goes straight to the internet. You should be able to do everything you need to do. He plugged in to our network because a teacher didn't know better, unplugged phone, handed it to him so he could do his presentation. It popped up on, which I now have a network security engineer, that there was this infected computer on our network. By the time he tracked it down, the person was gone. On the third school, we tracked them down. We told them they had malware. We had been able to get them blocked. We got a call from the vice president of the company apologizing for the fact that he had put us at risk. From my perspective, I was very unhappy with the company in general. I didn't blame my teachers. They didn't know any better. I mean, we didn't educate them, obviously, well enough. But you brought an infected machine that you obviously didn't do anything with about, that all these people typed in their Social Security numbers to do their health benefits, and you're infected with a major. And so we asked them to validate that all the data that they collected and submitted was secure. And thankfully, it was. And again, we didn't have any network monitoring, which we do now. We took away the ability to use a USB device. And some of you probably shudder at the thought of telling your staff, no more removable media. We said no more removable media. We had Google Chrome. We had Chromebooks. We had Google for Education. We have Google Drive. Put your stuff there. But we will no longer allow any type of removable media. I just recently did a presentation for a state, and when I walked in, I watched them plug a USB drive into the computer, and that just almost gives me nightmares because it's a transport of stuff, and it's not good. So we prevented it totally. We knew that our backup plan was not sufficient. And the reason for that is because Emotet actually landed a couple of weeks before it actually triggered. So we couldn't validate that our backups were any good because it could have been infected along the way, and our backup provider couldn't scan it and tell us. So we knew we needed to start all over with a new solution. We really got crazy because we were Google for Education and they let you have endless backups and they didn't have a limit. We backed up every single day for a really long time and kept everything. So we could go back like Time Machine is for Apple and we could select that. We might have been the group that broke Google because now you have a limit on how much your district can use or you can buy more. But that's okay because we put another solution in place. But for a while there, every single day we backed up everything. And not only in the cloud, but we were doing a remote server on our campuses as well as cold storage. We wanted to be sure we were extra cautious. We obviously didn't have enough network staff. I had one network engineer and me. My degree is not network engineering, but I learned a lot and I know a good bit, but I'm not a network engineer. So that was something we needed. And we really didn't have staff training. They didn't know what they should or shouldn't click on. And then the other thing that we had was we have computer labs for all our career technical programs like machining and CAD drawing. Well, we let the lab teachers have permissions to unfreeze those machines to do the updates, which they didn't always refreeze. So we took the ability for them to have passwords. So no longer did you have the password for our Wi-Fi, you don't have the password for your own machine, and you don't have passwords for lab machines. One of the things that the company that worked with us gave us that was tremendous was this company that we still use to this day. They do all that monitoring of the traffic coming in and out. They gave us that option for 30 days. And they said, we want you to understand what's happening to your network after the attack. And so here's brute force attack. They called it a category 5, and they call you. It doesn't matter what time it is. They call till somebody answers the phone and says, this is what you've got going on, and they blocked it for us. They gave me somebody else to rely on besides just us. So one of the things that we talked about as a team was, what do we do? You know, moving forward, what do we need? Well, we needed more staff. Our board approved that. So we ended up with 2 network engineers. We ended up with a network security engineer. And that was a huge help. We're still small, but, you know, you can only pay for so much. But we also realized that we needed to change the people's habits that were our constituents. And that's 13,000 students as well. And we needed to talk to them about why this was so important. And for those people that were there during the virus, they remembered the next school year because most of them lost all of the data. And I don't know how you're set up, but a lot of teachers save things on the desktop. We have this wonderful Google Drive, and when the computer died and it was infected, so was their stuff. And we worked really hard to recover as much as we could, but in the end, they still lost things, so they remembered. Well, now we're 5 years down the road. We have 200 new staff members that were never here. They don't have that remembrance of what it was like to lose everything. So we started training our staff. We used a program that actually fishes the staff, and then we can look at our grid and see how we are, which I have coming up. But the main thing that I tried to express to the board and, you know, to our staff was that if we don't change, you know, we'll become extinct. This is one of my favorite books. Everybody's read it. But it was one of those things that you need to do this or you can't go about teaching school. You can't have that laptop. You can't have that internet and that computer. So today, no administrative rights. We use 6 different security solutions. And that's because we're targeting, we use ones for our servers specifically. We use a second layer on top of our financial people and our bookkeepers, administrative folks. We put something at the edge. We do monitoring to see what's coming on and off of our network. So we really boosted ourselves up. Of course, like I said, no network cables, no USB drives. If you need a password or you need something done to your computer or your lab, a technician has to come to you. And that was a big change. When you have 6 technicians and all of these people, that can be overwhelming. But we got in a really good work system. We added another help desk and we were able to move on. So just to give you an idea, since most of you are probably not familiar with the K-12, this is the K-12 threat landscape as it continues to grow as a targeted area. As you know, there's all kind of craziness in the news. I mean, who would have thought a USB could be a letter bomb? So many things are changing that in an education world we don't have the same kind of funding, so we have to be very diligent on what we pick. We started running those physical security tests by doing phishing of our staff. I'm proud to say that we were below the industry phish prone at 5.8%, but as you know, it only takes one person to download an incorrect invoice to destroy an entire network. The FBI came, they took our patient zero drive. We've stayed in close contact with them. I'm happy to report that as of Friday, another person was in Cleveland going to court. So I think that's 3 or 4 so far, and it continues to be an active work. They published on the website about Emotet going down, the FBI did, and they said a district in North Carolina. That was us, even though they didn't say it, and I appreciate that we've been able to help them. But this score is really not good when you look at it, and my favorite line of this one is that because we know who you are now, we can go help you. That first person on the list clicked on every phishing email we have ever sent. So they obviously need some one-to-one. So our network security engineer is now able to go out and speak to them and say, hey, what's going on with this? We've had staff, and maybe you have too, but the Apple Card, I'm really desperate. I need you to go buy me a $100 Apple Card. Send me the code once you get it so I can take care of something. And staff has actually fallen for that. And so we really push this training and this targeted to help them. When somebody emails you and tells you you need to click now because your Bitcoin is about to expire, if you don't know what Bitcoin is and you never heard of it, why'd you click on it? You know, it's just, and this tells us because we're able to see the phishing reports. And believe it or not, we don't tell them we're doing it. A lot of our districts that use this around us said, well, the staff should know. No, the staff shouldn't know. We want to know honestly what they're doing, and if I tell them be on the lookout, then we can't help them with what they're doing. So we didn't share it, and we do this to our Board of Education, to the superintendent. If you have an email in the district, we send this out so we can help train those that need it and help them think about what it was they were clicking on, as well as professional development sessions. So I wanted to take a time here at the very end because you may have some questions and offer that as an opportunity. We do have a microphone to come around, and if anybody has anything they're curious about.
Just raise a hand if anyone has a question. No? Okay.
Over here.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you for the presentation, ma'am. Ma'am, with your school board, how have you maintained consistent interest, especially from non-technical personnel, in keeping the forefront of security going? As you said, 5 years after the attack, that institutional memory starts to fade. How do you keep pushing and keep security as prevalent as it was on the day of the attack, ma'am?
So we do 2 things. The first thing we did was we always do a security update every year. And we do it as an open board presentation, so that's recorded and live stream. And we talk about things that are happening in the school district. We talk about that we still have had attacks. The couple groups that we have phenomenal back ends. So we'll bring up some generic slides just to kind of show them, you know, we've had 6 brute force attacks this quarter. The company's reached out to us 3 times for serious things, and they've blocked, you know, however many they blocked. But then we also go into closed session and we dive a little deeper and we give them the stuff you don't want the public to know. And we show them those graphs. We talk about the reports. We talk about how that we're still seeing this because we need them, as you mentioned, we need their buy-in. With the one security platform that we use is about $150,000 a year. It was higher at the beginning. It was around 200, but we're down to about 150 for that one alone. And we need the board's support because that's not part of a technology budget. That sits outside our budget. So we do open sessions and we do closed sessions. As well as one thing that we do have that nobody has institutional knowledge of is our beginning teachers. So when they come in or new employees, they have no background at all. So they always receive a presentation at the beginning of the year or when they come in for new employee orientation. And part of that is about security, about what phishing emails look like, and who to report it to. We have a help desk so folks can call. And one of the other things that my network security engineer did that was so great is he's very personable. And so you don't feel stupid when you call them. We're like, call us, email us, send it to us. We'll look at it. If it's good, great, you can pass it on. But if it's not, you could have saved a lot. Press the spam button and, let the email know. So we really try to work with them. I think, too, also leadership has been really key in our department. To ask members that are paid from 7:30 a.m. to 4 to work those 42 days, to be there all night and all day. We developed, thankfully, before we ever had any type of major event, a very positive relationship. There's nothing I wouldn't do and ask my staff to do without me being there with them. And because of that teamwork and that leadership style that I had employed with them, being that team member, they carry the message too. So every time they're in schools doing work orders, they can talk to the different teachers, they can answer questions, and they're just as important as a part as doing these trainings. But by far going to the board and making sure that they understood this is still going on. And most recently, one of the board members told me before a session, he had said, she said, if Casey presents it and asks for it, say yes, it's important. So we had spent enough time with them, educating them at a lower level, describing how malware gets in and not using the big technical terms. I have the presentation that I gave the board. If you're interested, you can send me an email. But I really took it from the high technical level down to, describing it as highways and cars getting on and crashes and blocking traffic and things like that they could kind of relate to. Right here.
Thanks for sharing your experience. I'm just curious, have you guys had a internal pen test done yet to test you out?
Yes. Our state now has moved forward with their security, and they hit us and do a monthly report. So testing is definitely, it didn't exist early on at all. And after this, with the group that we were working with and the others, we had that. But now the state, as funding for the school districts, provide that, and we get a report. And I love that report. I always share that at the board. Hey, look, we were tested, 0. We're good. So we also had a major, the state, as they were looking at evolving, did an assessment of every district and every school of your network. And they came in and provided this extremely large report of all the things that they found, ports that might have been opened, all the different things. And Rockingham County, being the small district in the state, we were one of the top 5 when it came to security and what they couldn't penetrate. And we even went as far as monitoring what they were doing to us while they were doing it. Because I was like, well, if you're going to be in my network doing stuff, I want to know what it is you're in here doing. So we did that, and we took the notes and the advice that they had and worked with that. And we really worked on that response plan, making sure that, that was well known as well.
Quick question for you about your board of directors. It sounds like you've had support, but it also sounds like it might have taken this to happen for you to get that support. Do you have any advice for folks that, see this coming, right? It's not a matter of if, but when, before the event happens, to get the support of leadership, the funding, the board of directors, in civilian companies, to maybe learn from these lessons or maybe not have that happen at their company?
Yeah, I've often said that in education, because funding isn't as strong as everywhere else, sometimes it takes a brick wall and slam and right into it before you can get anything. Even when this happened to us, I still had to convince a board that they needed to give me like $300,000 in network security funds. And one of the things that I did was, in our realm, we had that security map. So I kept pointing out, look at this, they're same size as us, they're the same this, they're the same that. Look what happened to them. They got ransomware, they had to pay ransomware, they tried to pay ransomware. I went through all the different things that I was seeing, and I was showing what was happening to others, and I was explaining to them why we were lucky. We were lucky because ransomware did not trigger, which we wouldn't have paid it anyway. We lost our stuff, we'd have just lost it anyway. But we spent a lot of time talking about, in those early sessions, about others that were going on, because their first reaction naturally is, you're the CTO, you let this happen, would you do wrong kind of thing. And so we started those discussions about what was there. I would say that's a good point. In my world, I also brought up the Target had been breached. Mecklenburg was right there beside us, had been breached. And I showed industries that were much larger than us, made a whole lot more money than us, that were having bigger problems, and where we could have been just like them had it went through the firewall. And I think that really helped. I've spoken in a lot of different, personally, at some different districts and explained what happened to us. And we're really, like, I look at it, we're not much different than a corporation, because we still have those 13,000 kids on our network. And we still have those 2,000 to 3,000 staff members on laptops, plus all these other machines, and we have all the business. We do all the other things, only we're just not funded. And so we have to be creative, and we had to make some decisions. And I will say our board did not cut sports. We didn't cut the arts. We didn't do anything like that. We just reallocated. There's one back here. How we did that. But that would be my advice, and that's what worked for my board, who was kind of skeptical about the money. And you have to remember, in a rural county, the people, some of them, were skeptical too. Do we really need to spend that kind of money? And in the end, it's paid off, knock on some wood, but we're 5 years in, and we're catching it, and we're stopping it, we're preventing it. And every year we reevaluate what we're using, every year. Yes?
Yes, you mentioned it took about 2 weeks to get the network back. Did you lose any servers or databases, like central ones? And I wanted to know how long the business impact was felt. Like, how long did it take to get back to complete normal operations for the school?
So yes, we did use those programs. We were instructed with our presentations not to sell any particular vendor, but I believe you said SentinelOne is one of the ones that we do use. Several of the vendors actually that are here are ones that we use in addition to a few others. The 42 days was how long it took straight to get that very last, bus server and finance. We went in order of priority. It was most important for everybody to get paid. So we started there, and then we worked our way down from, the finance and the... Now, if you're familiar in your old school, our finance server is the AS400, and we have migrated now away from that. But the AS400 is so old, and works fantastically, by the way, that it wasn't even something anybody could get to. But we still went through a process with it and made sure it was good and got it up. And then our time clocks, and then our bus software, and all the other pieces that we had out there. Hopefully that was all that you would ask.
Hey, thanks again for the presentation. And wow, my voice really does sound like that. Wanted to ask you a question. You had the scope of work to understand it from your district and having it roll up to the state board and everything like that, as far as impact and how this can be evangelized. Have you ever given any musings or thought to how this could be applied at a higher level, a broader level, or evangelized to, say, Department of Education, Homeland Security, and enacting other government institutions besides the FBI when you're going through it, in trying to create a program or a policy that could shape the whole landscape, so to speak? Has that been a thought for you, and if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, obviously getting it to grow. I think the fact that our district and myself and my superintendent were willing to go out and just tell everybody. I mean, I'm standing here telling our folks at home live, can rewatch it, that we weren't afraid to share what happened to us, and therefore others can make changes. Our state department, our Department of Public Instruction, has put new things in place. They've really ramped up. They are... When they did the evaluation of us, one of the things they docked us for was our firewall wasn't Gen 2. And I turned around and sent them an email back and said, but it's your firewall, not mine. So you're the one that actually is not Gen 2. But they've now went to that. So they're moving forward too, and they're trying to grow. Of course, we worked with the FBI during this whole thing, gave them our drive, and they got to see what had happened to us. They have a whole department. If y'all haven't looked into it, I'd really go ahead and make sure you Google the FBI Cybersecurity. I think there's a lot of groups out there that are doing that. As far as me personally, I just continue to try to present and share our story and kind of how we evolved and, you know, what it's really like to be in that moment if you haven't been there. And again, my time is coming to an end. My son's in the back wearing the hoodie. He came along. He's getting ready to go into the Coast Guard, so he came along with me to see a presentation. But he has some business cards if you want them. I'll go out in the hall afterwards. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I can send you any of the documents that we use, and I'm more than happy to share or speak to you later. And I appreciate all of you coming this morning and hope you have a great conference.
Thank you so much, Casey. Really appreciate it.